Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Scream 4, starring Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Emma Roberts, and Hayden Panettiere, directed by Wes Craven. Now, I remember this is the first Scream film I went to the theaters for, because the other three I was a little too young for, but I have seen them later on in my life. But this is the first one I went to theaters for, and this was while I was in Las Vegas at a trip one time. And did I like the movie? Well, let's see about this. Let's get into it. We start with a phone call from Ghostface Killer, and we get Sherry and Trudy while trying to pick a scary movie as she picks Saw 4, which is one of the worst choices, as Trudy says. It's gross, but they're all gross, so what are you complaining for? And the phone rings again, and they realize they're dead. Meet by hearing the doorbell, and Sherry opens the door, and after they open the door, they get killed, and that's when we learn we're in a movie within a movie, as the movie is Stab 6, and seriously, how many more of that piece of shit did they come out with? We get two blondes named Rachel, played by Anna Paquin, and Chloe, played by Kristen Bell, as we're in another movie, and this is going on one more fucking time in the first 10 minutes, which is such a mistake. After we get the title of the movie on the screen and we catch up with Sidney Prescott, returned by Neve Campbell, as she's back in Woodsboro with her assistant Rebecca Walters, played by Allison Brie, to promote a book she wrote, which is a nice touch, as it's better than being disguised as a therapist from the last movie. Dewey, returned by David Arquette, gets a call from his ringtone of Axel F., which is rather cute, as Beverly Hills Cop came to mind from that office, as he's asleep next to Gail? Yeah, that might have been Gail. Returned by Courtney Cox, which is really awkward because they were divorced while this movie was being made to begin with. While we get introduced to Kirby, played by Hayden Panettiere, as she picks up her friend Jill Roberts, Jill, played by Julia Roberts' niece Emma Roberts, as Kirby says, you have to promise not to kill me. And I'm thinking, that's 13 minutes into this movie, and you're giving it away right off the bat. And for the rest of it, I'm guessing it's Jill the whole time, as it was telegraphed to death. They also pick up their friend Olivia and talk about Jill's ex-boyfriend Trevor is calling both Kirby and Olivia. And when I hear Kirby, I think of the video game character, which is really distracting, as Jill's cousin Sydney is in town. And she is called back by Jenny Randall, and it happens to be Ghostface, while Kirby almost gets them crashed because not seeing a stop sign and a truck going through as the first few minutes without Stab is very laughable, to the point I can't stand it. Dewey sees it's the anniversary of the original killings, as Dewey is this time the sheriff, and the deputy is Judy Hicks, as it feels like she's flirting with him while married to Gail, and gives them these lemon squares, which is obvious that she's in love with Dewey. Deputy Perkins, played by Anthony Anderson, calls about the household of the Randalls, and they get over there quickly while Gail is trying to write a book, as nothing comes to mind, and Charlie Walker, played by Rory Culkin, whom I reviewed before in M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, and Robbie Mercer, who is the perverted videographer, as he asks them what's his favorite scary movie, while Kirby responds to Bambi, which was pretty funny because that's not a horror movie, but it still makes me laugh. We meet Trevor as he wants Jill to forgive him, while Gail visits Sydney at the bookstore, where she signs them until Dewey comes in, and other deputies come in to find a phone ringing and blood on Sydney's books in the trunk, and as it's her rental car. And I'm going to be honest here and say I like Kirby in this movie, as she's a hell of a lot of fun, while the other characters are not that fun. I don't like watching them here. Everyone here's Jenny and Barney and are dead, and who's Barney? As it was never said at all, while Gail has quite a briefing with Deputy Judy, and this whole town knows about the murder thanks to the internet, while Dewey, Gail, have an argument, as Gail decides to go rogue, while Sydney and Jill reunite as cousins, and Olivia and Kirby are there, and their interview was humorous, with Kirby being around, as she's the fun presence, whereas everyone else is taking this quite seriously and gets bland after a while. Rebecca has an awkward conversation with Gail as she threatens her at the end of the scene. And Gail says she's still got it, which is kind of funny, but not really, as Rebecca was annoying to begin with as Sydney's assistant, while Kirby talks awkwardly about scars, and as this scene is horrible, and the dialogue is badly written, but not as bad as Scream 3 in my opinion. Jill gets a surprise visit from Trevor, and Sydney comes in, and afterhand, Deputy Judy brings up how they were in high school together, and were in a drama class together, as Sydney was Tyga Lily, and Judy was one of the Lost Boys. And despite she works for the sheriff, I personally don't think it's her, nor does she have a beef with Sydney, which would have been a clever twist, but it's not the case in this movie. While Perkins is out in front of the house, Olivia comes home while the deputies are being perverts, and as she lives next to Jill, while Jill and Kirby have a sleepover and watch Shaun of the Dead and act like Ghostface, and Kirby gets a call from Ghostface using Trevor's phone while standing in a closet in next door, aka Olivia's house, as she gets killed by Ghostface while Sydney goes next door to get Ghostface and sees Olivia's dead body, and Jill comes to the house and sees as well. And where the fuck were Perkins and the other deputy at? As they were looking for the killer, as it makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. Slasher movies never make any fucking sense. I'm not even gonna lie to you. If it were me, I would fire the motherfuckers right off the bat. Gail goes to Robbie and Charlie because they record for their movie club, as she wants to work with them, and they ask for a celebrity visit from Sidney Prescott, as these guys are very annoying, by the way. Sydney fires Rebecca because she's a money-hungry bitch, while Sydney cares about her readers more than the money, and Rebecca gets in the elevator to find the car, and she gets a call from Ghostface while in the parking garage, and as she gets in the car, she ignores the phone calls and gets killed, and her death was rather funny, as was obvious. And a lot of the deaths, were obvious and predictable, while throwing her on top of a van, which was an interesting choice. Gail and Sydney go to the cinema club at the high school with Kirby as one of the audience members, and they're going to have a movie marathon of the 7 stab movies back to fucking back, while the killer is out there, which to me is ridiculous and stupid, because these motherfuckers are, let me just tell you guys something right now, they're dead. They dead. If they do shit like this, as this is laughable in an unkind kind of way, and the acting is awful in this movie. Absolutely awful. As this movie isn't engaging me, but it's not as worse than Scream 3. Gil disguises Ghostface at the Stabathon and puts cameras all over the place as she spies on them, and Ghostface finds the camera rather too quickly, while Dewey goes to the abandoned farmhouse where the Stabathon is at, and where Gail is at, and Dewey arrives as she sees the camera and sees Ghostface is behind her, and this Ghostface is very talkative, and I thought, just shut up, please. Just shut the fuck up, please. Well, Dewey saves Gail's life, and I know she survives this one because she's in the next one. Perkins and the other deputy look around the house for a quick perimeter check, while Sydney is hearing some noises coming from the backyard and puts it down, and the other deputy finds Perkins pretending to be dead while he scares the shit out of him. And this is where I get typical from Anthony Anderson, as this laugh is both he and the other deputy are killed, and one in the back and one in the head, as Anthony Anderson says, "Fuck Bruce Willis," which was humorous. Jill's mother comes back from the grocery store, and Sydney gets on the phone with Ghostface and sees Jill left the house as she goes to Kirby's place, and that's not the best idea, as Mrs. Roberts gets stabbed and killed, and Judy arrives, which is seriously bad timing on her part, and the mistakes being made in this movie is very problematic. Trevor comes to Kirby's house for the after party, and Jill tries to find her phone, as Trevor got a text message from Jill's phone, and that seems like a little odd. Meanwhile, I get the impression Kirby wants Charlie based on the movie trivia, and the way they look at each other is pretty damn obvious. They want each other, but the movie isn't engaging me at this point, and so why the fuck should I care? Other than Kirby was fun to watch in this movie, and the fact Trevor came in, which when they were about to smooch up the storm, which was way too amusing. Ghostface kills Robbie, and he says he's gay. And I'm thinking of, first of all, bullshit. Second of all, they're breaking the rules as they keep doing this. So, for dumbass reasons, Sydney arrives at Kirby's place, and they see Robbie is dead, and Ghostface attacks and goes upstairs to Sydney and Jill as he goes around to get her while she was on the phone with Dewey. And Kirby catch up with each other and hide in a hidden room as Charlie is tortured while he calls her from Charlie's phone and brings up the horror movie genre. And she gets it right and wins the challenge. And Charlie kills Kirby out of the blue, which I didn't see that one coming, as it was a nice piece of twist, which is something I'll give the movie. We also learned Jill is the main killer, which I saw coming from the first 13 minutes of the movie. And now I'm pissed off at this point. And she kills Trevor, and now I'm angry with the film. Why did Jill do this? Because she feels less special than Sydney? As it was all Sydney all over the fucking place and wanting fans, as this was supposed to be a remake, the remake of the franchise, when really, this is the fourth part of Jill stabs Sydney. Just, Jesus, give me a fucking break with Jill's reasons. And hurts herself and cleans the handle of the knife and make it look like Trevor did it, which is typical for damn sure. And this is getting too predictable. Jill wakes up at the hospital with Dewey on her side as he tells her Sydney might make it while Jill is on a mission to kill Sydney for the third act. And Dewey realizes Jill has never heard about a wound on her shoulder, and she brings it up saying she never told me that, and Jill goes to Sydney's room at the hospital and tries to kill her. And Dewey comes in as does Gail, and Jill has a gun pointed at Dewey's unconscious body, and shoots Judy, who has the bulletproof vest, and gets Gail up, and Sydney sneaks up with a shocker and clears her head and shoots her in the head, and the climax was bad enough as this whole movie. What the actual fuck was that? Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 2.8 out of 10. The deaths were too obvious and predictable, as this entire movie, and the fact that Jill was the killer the entire time was predictable after the first 13 minutes of the movie. The movie is badly written with no fun characters except for Kirby, as her presence was a hell of a lot of fun while everybody else was dull, including the three main leads and the killer herself, which is a real shame. The movie is bad for damn sure, but not as bad as Scream 3, but the choices being made here are absolutely terrible, and I'm glad we're under new management as far as the director's chair, and we'll see how this goes, but for now, this is a pretty bad film. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and now we'll be back with the 2022 version of Scream, and until then, what's your favorite scary movie?